What's up, everybody? Tour dates, I got them. Well, actually, I got one big one. It's coming up October 21st, San Pedro, California, which, of course, is my neighborhood in Los Angeles. I'm going to be at the Grand Annex. I'm producing a comedy series at the Grand Annex in San Pedro, California. The first show is October 21st, and it features myself and Stephanie Blum. Stephanie Blum has been on Nickelodeon, MTV, HBO, you name it. She's phenomenal. She's one of my favorite comics in all of LA. She's one of my favorite comics anywhere, really. And that show featuring her and myself is going to be on October 21st, 8 p.m., San Pedro, California, at the Grand Annex. You can get tickets at romplacone.com. Again, that's October 21st, Saturday night, 8 p.m. at the Grand Annex. Stephanie Blum and myself, tickets at romplacone.com. See you there. I was around 10 years old. My cousins from South Carolina were coming to visit for the winter holidays, as they often did. My cousin Greg and I were both starting to get into music. That Christmas, Santa brought us both some CDs. We made our way up to my dad and uncle's childhood bedroom where the CD player lived. One of Greg's was first. I recognized the logo on it. I had seen that DK-looking thing around before. My cousin told me, I'm a skater, and this is what skaters listen to. Then the drums from California Uberalis kicked in. That was the first time I heard Dead Kennedys. Episode 005, Jello Biafra. As I grew up, I listened to Dead Kennedys more, but in my early 20s, I started connecting with the spoken word side of Jello's catalog. In fact, he's one of the reasons I started doing stand-up. When I got into stand-up comedy, I didn't know a whole lot about it. I didn't even know it was a job. I was just a young dude into punk and lefty politics looking for direction. Naturally, I migrated to Jello's spoken word. When I first started getting gigs, when other comics would ask me who my favorites were, I was embarrassed that my only answers were George Carlin and Bill Hicks. So I started saying Henry Rollins, Jello Biafra, just so I would have a longer response that maybe made it sound like I knew what I was talking about. Jello and I talk his descent into spoken word, his legendary mayoral and presidential campaigns, and, of course, politics and the state of the world. Jello's known to have a lot to say. This interview was actually 2.5 hours long. Editing it down to around an hour was a challenge. Shameless plug, if you want the full unedited episode, become a patron. Also, for the record, this was the first episode of 1000 I ever recorded. Please welcome to the show, Jello Biafra. So, Jello, thanks so much for being here, first and foremost. I'm real excited to talk to you. And
I'm happy to take the plunge. I'm only doing this because Greg Palast told me you got to do this dude's show. And I don't know whether it's because he really likes your show or because he really likes you, or maybe even both. I turned 65 in the middle of June. So, and every damn, racketeer health plan, which I guess they all are in this country because of the way we're set up, is already sending me all this mail and stuff. You're about to be 65. We would like to help you. We would like to help ourselves to your money too. And don't get too ill just yet because we don't have to pay anything. So, yeah, there's that. I mean, maybe it'll be less traumatic than turning 64 because a certain all-time horrible McCartney song still won't leave my head. In that one.
Is that your least favorite McCartney tune?
No. I mean, I've successfully avoided most of his later solo stuff, although, Silly Love Songs kind of speaks for itself. But I generally knew enough and knew there was stuff out there that was cool from a really early age. I got hooked on rock and roll when the Beatles were still Beatlemania when I was in second grade in 1965. Quickly went for the hard stuff, early Stones, and the great unacknowledged prototype for so many American garage rock bands even today, namely Paul Revere and the Raiders, and primetime show called Hullabaloo once a week. They'd have them on, Eric Burden and Mitch Ryder, as well as poppier people and stuff. But I kind of knew from a childhood Walter Mitty Cinderella thing, what I wanted to be when I allegedly grew up from that point onward, in a way. I mean, it derailed in third. A couple of years, I was watching a certain TV show and decided when other kids were writing, when I grow up, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a policeman. I want to be a baseball player. I want to be a nurse. I want to be the Penguin. I want to be the Riddler. Those are my role models, and they are cool.
Where
was I? Why did I go that way anyway? I can't even remember now. But
we got on Paul McCartney.
Oh yeah. There's so basically, just kind of wasn't interested in what a lot of other people were, including a lot of other TV shows the kids watched, because my parents controlled the TV. Never occurred to me to ask for another show, and none of them really sounded that interesting anyway. I did get annoyed when they wouldn't let me watch Star Trek because they thought it was too violent, and they'd barely ever seen it. I mean, they were very, very much in the, the more peaceful liberal kind of thing, very anti-war, very anti-racist. And my dad got put through Korea, and he knew how to shoot. He was a good marksman, although he refused to carry a gun in the war, but there were not guns in the house. Thus, none of my classmates ever died because I felt like shooting them. That's the best way to prevent all these school shootings, is not let people have so many guns. We all know that. But and then by the time I was about 13, I discovered FM radio with the smoother DJs and got away from a lot of the pop stuff. But we're going to hear a new cut from the new Dave Mason album. And here's a new singer-songwriter called Elton John. And then there was really rocking stuff like, wow, Uriah Heep, this is pretty cool. Oh, yeah, Jethro Tull. Locomotive Breath. I'm going to go buy that record because I was allowed to have records finally, which my parents put off for a long time. But then I discovered the used record store, and there was one right near my high school, Trade a Tape and Records. They had a free box, so I just take everything every single day for 3 years just to see what it was. And Boulder, Colorado, where I grew up, was such a country rock, Scientology, jazz fusion hellhole at that point that a lot of the cool stuff wasn't just real cheap, but it was free. Okay, I paid 10 cents for Funhouse by the Stooges when that came in, sealed for a dime. Best album I ever got in my life. And but things like that. I mean, there's also told this story a lot, but for you need this one. There was also anything I could get to find out anything, and I only had so much allowance money. So a 50-cent record instead of a $4 one, maybe I could get more 50-cent records, take chances on them. Just I thought the covers were cool, and just went by hunches and did pretty well overall. This day I live for magic accidents, and people who accuse me of helping empty the thrift stores by talking about a lot of that weird stuff in the Incredibly Strange Music Volume 2 book, they just don't take enough chances, believe you me. But there was a writer for the Denver Post, which we got on Sunday in Boulder, named Jared Johnson. And around 8th grade, maybe 9th grade, I had then discovered Alice Cooper, thanks to a sitter, no less, who also turned me on to Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart slowly but surely. But that was the first one I finally realized, oh my God, rock and roll music can actually have cool lyrics and stuff, and not just "I love you, baby, shooby dooby doo" over and over and over again. Alice Cooper's words spoke to me. I even read "Dead Baby," says the poem, for my 8th grade speech class, and the teacher liked it and cast me in the Boris Karloff role in Arsenic and Old Lace a year later and stuff. So, but then this Jared Johnson guy in the Denver Post, turns out in the Sunday little culture artsy Sunday insert, he wrote capsule reviews of records, and guess whose side he was normally on? The first one I ever saw, it was an entire column instead of capsules devoted to how much he hated Alice Cooper. And I thought, oh, wow, cool, they're writing about Alice Cooper. What's the matter with this guy? He could probably write really pretty ballads if he wanted to. Who is this dude? But then it turned out he had encyclopedic knowledge of stuff he didn't like. Of course he liked the Eagles. Of course he liked Elton John. And of course Paul Simon and the Bee Gees were the greatest composers of the 20th century. He actually said that. But he also would say things like, Black Sabbath is almost as bad as the MC5. off to trade a tape I go. I gotta hear this band like now. Back in the USA, and I go, oh, this is a pretty good rock and roll album. Oh, here's another one that, oh, this is half price. The other one's 25 cents. Kick out the jams.
Mm-hmm. That
was the one that really changed my life. I hadn't gotten a hold of his Raw Power or any of the Stooges stuff yet, but that was that was what I needed.
You mentioned in your childhood something that really stuck with you that you remember vividly was JFK. What do you think happened to JFK?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I have a little bit of a hard time believing Oswald acted alone.
Sure.
But even if there was some sort of cover up with a Warren Commission or George Bush the First was involved in his CIA days, that I don't totally believe it, but I don't totally not believe it either. He was there kicking around as an asset then. And E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis, two of the Watergate burglars with a long history of horrible spook activity and things. You know, that picture of them dressed as bums in the crowd. What were they doing there? But people have pointed the finger at different mobsters, Sam Giancana, John Roselli, Santo Trafficante, even some of the ones that turned up later, and Daniel Sheehan of the Christic Institute's little spider web that kind of went poof when the judge seized everything he had and gave it to the counterfeit criminals and things. Yeah, I don't really know, but obviously, I'm not sure I subscribe to Oliver Stone's thing that he was knocked off because he was going to end the Vietnam War. I am not at all sure he was, number one. There's so much fear from the Cold War. The anti-communist fervor in JFK was pretty high. And it also was one of the reasons LBJ believed some generals he never should have listened to because they were on the supposed front lines fighting this big Soviet threat. And he going through his lens, I can at least see for at least a little bit why he wanted to sniff out and see if some of the key people in the anti-war movement or the Port Huron statement or whatever were working for the Soviet Union. I can see why he might think that, but hopefully, unlike Hoover, he and a lot of others didn't suspect that for very long. I mean, by the time of Nixon, he knew they didn't, but he just hated them because he hated everybody, especially anybody who was against Nixon.
You ran for office twice. You ran for mayor of San Francisco, which of course, all those clips are up on YouTube now from your campaign.
Oh, good. I probably don't know about a lot of them. I don't spend a lot of time watching myself on TV. As little
sure.
Possible, actually.
No, I understand. But yeah, like stuff from your mayoral run in 1979, and then you ran for president with the Green Party in 2000. Do you have a favorite run for office?
Well, I mean, the really wild one, of course, was the mayor campaign. I was barely 21 years old, still fresh off the boat from Boulder, I suppose. I moved out to San Francisco in the end of February 78 to pursue punk rock dreams when the rent was cheap enough to behave like that. It brought the Beats there, Summer of Love, and then it brought me and many, many more people who did many great things. But anyway, so Boulder, growing up, because to finish back to JFK, it's not just JFK that affected me so deeply and all. I was a real news hound even then at age 5. I'd watch a cartoon or two, but not sit all afternoon and do that. And then the news would come on. And I can't remember whether the Huntley Brinkley Report or then Channel 4 with Clyde Davis, the local dude, was and Weatherman Bowman with his little marker and all his enthusiasm and stuff, or his rival with the mustache on another local show, Stormy Rotman. But anyway, we mainly watched Weatherman Bowman. But I watched all of it with equal fascination. I mean, I'm told my favorite cartoon characters when I was that little was Bullwinkle and Senator Everett Dirksen. But so I saw the Berlin Wall go up. And, it would sometimes might be on while we were eating dinner early on, and you'd see things like dogs being sicked on marchers for things like voting rights across the Pettus Bridge in Selma. the hoses, the dogs. I don't know whether it was that exact protest, but that does trigger some shit at me whenever I see the moving footage of that. And my mother just perked up and said, I don't understand why anybody would hate somebody else for the color of their skin, in a very lecturing mom tone I knew well, and that stuck with me. That made perfect sense to me. And Boulder was almost all white, but how can you hate somebody because of the color of their skin? That's just wrong. And that, of course, was also when TV network news was a lot less censored and sugar-coated and dumbed down like it is today. They all there was only those three networks, plus there was PBS and stuff, and they put a lot of money into their news networks, even if it didn't make that much money back, because they wanted to outscoop the other. NBC and CBS were constantly trying to outdo each other, and ABC wasn't far behind to playing catch up and stuff all the time. So they wanted kick-ass news reporting with international bureaus all over the world. So you saw bloody wounded soldiers in Vietnam. You saw rounded up North Vietnamese in the water with duct tape over their faces and stuff. You saw Viet Cong, maybe. You saw the attacks with the dogs and everything else. And occasionally, even later on, pollution and all. So I grew up pretty interested and pretty passionate at a very early age, and was reading the local paper, the Boulder Daily Camera, too. And my parents were crying, oh, yeah, look at the city council election. There's a hippie running for city council. And he came in next to last, John Link, but his quote to the camera was, it was a conservative paper and stuff, and they still had a conservative sheriff and a stereotypical jowly police chief from 50s cop movies or something, Myron Teagarden. But anyway, but John Link, his quote after the election, even a creep like me got 1,000 votes. Next city council election, I'm older, getting more interested in these things. My hair was well past my shoulders by then. So, and that was still a dangerous thing to do, even in a town overrun with hippies like Boulder was. But wish they had better musical taste, some of them. But anyway, so then there was a much more concocted prankster on the next time by a guy named John Davenport. And his picture, when they had all the candidate pictures and their statements right before the election, suit and tie man this, suit and tie man that, whatever. Then here's a guy in a pirate suit with, if I recall, an eye patch with some of his teeth blacked out and stuff. John Davenport. I will ban cars from the city of Boulder and other things like that. And I thought, wow, that guy's cool. So then we were a little older, and I hadn't quite left town yet, and me and my longtime close friend and, the troublemaker my parents kept trying to get me to stop hanging out with anymore, but I just didn't, because he's also the smartest kid in the school, but the one they couldn't control. Great sense of humor, super creative guy, beloved dear friend to this day. Always hang out when we go back. And we talked about running a slate for the school board in tutus and, Travis Bickle mohawks, because the punks didn't have them yet, on a free drugs for children available at playgrounds platform. Never got around to it. Smoking,
you didn't do it?
Weed, I don't know. But then later, here I am in San Francisco, and I'm folded into the back of our original drummer, Bruce Schlesinger, who called himself Ted. I think it's his 70th birthday today, by the way. And folded into the back of his powder blue VW Bug he may still have. And he's saying, hey, Jello, hey, Biafra, you got such a big mouth, you should run for president. No, you should run for mayor. And there was a mayor election on. Aha, I think I will. So then we arrived to the Pear Ubu show we were going to, which was at a kind of an anti-audience venue called the Old Waldorf, where there was little tables all the way to the front of the stage, 2-drink minimum with watery Cokes for the teens like me, or apparently had other teens, whatever. And so there we went. And the minute I walked in the door, I started telling people I was running for mayor. and they got really excited, more excited than I thought they were going. Oh my God, what have I done? I need a platform, quick. Got a felt pen, got a napkin, started writing down my platform when Perry Ubu was blowing us all away about 3 feet away up on the stage. First thing in my head, John Davenport, ban cars from the city of San Francisco. Then it just popped into my head, yeah, make police officer an elective office. People vote for their cops every 4 years, and it's the districts they patrol, which means the cops would have to live in the neighborhood, that they vote that way. I mean, George Floyd would still be alive if police were elected, and so many others too, before and since. So I stand by that one. I'm sure other people thought of it too, but I absolutely stand by that as a really good idea.
I'm with you.
And what were some of the others? The Harvey Milk and Mayor George Moscone murders were very fresh in people's minds. So I said, and Proposition 13, that horrible anti-tax scam measure that they credit with launching the so-called Reagan Revolution, or like corporate coup that's still going on, if you ask me. Yeah. But so the city was starting to become a little bit bare in the cupboard, looking for things to cut. So I was like, nah, because the state wasn't kicking down money anymore. They lost their tax base because of Proposition 13, which mainly gutted the schools. And California went from number 1 in the country, primarily because of Jerry Brown's father, the Governor Pat Brown, who built a lot of the schools and the universities, got that over the ground. But they went from number 1 in education, and after a bunch of years of Proposition 13, I think we're still down around 49 or something. You get better education in Mississippi. Well, at least until you vote, it appears. But you see what I'm saying? So I thought, okay, what are we going to do about this? Okay, have the Parks Department erect statues of Dan White, the murderer of Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone, all in parks all over town. That'll get their attention. And let the Parks Departments sell eggs, tomatoes, and rocks to throw at them. That was another one. Then another one was since the appointed mayor who was running for a real term and had already proved herself to be basically the meanest mayor I've ever experienced in that town. Even, not as flamboyantly corrupt as Willie Brown, but even like more just wore hatred for the underprivileged on her sleeve and stuff, even more than Gavin Newsom does. But the Margaret Thatcher, the wicked witch of the West, Dianne Feinstein. And she was talking about cleaning up Market Street, law and order, Dianne Feinstein. We don't want San Francisco to become kook city, which of course was an attack on not just the small punk community, but what was left of the Summer of Love folks, gay LGBTQ. She was slapping them and everything. She was nasty. I wound up placing 4th out of 10. The third guy was a gay landlord dude, but mainly just like a landlord. I remember Harvey Milk, vote for me. And people did. And between me and David Scott, who came in number 3, we forced Feinstein into a runoff she was not expecting to be forced into with her arch enemy and, blood lively guy, Quentin Kopp. Another long time. He was his own Democratic machine and heavy-handed and stuff. And it turned out to be the battle royale between downtown Big Biz, Feinstein, and the outlying conservative neighborhoods and the real estate interests. And that was Quentin Kopp. And they were not the best of friends. So the night of the election, not the runoff, but the other one, somebody from Feinstein's camp, maybe her spokesman, I wish it had been her, but said, if somebody like Jello Biafra gets that many votes, this city is in real trouble. Mission accomplished. There were 200 punks or less in San Francisco at the time, maybe 100 or left. or less. And we're talking about the new wave side of things, who also played at the same main underground venue, Mabuhay Gardens, that we did. And they really, a lot of them played Biafra for mayor benefit too. I mean, they realized, I didn't realize how much trouble I was causing by doing this. I was just thinking of Boulder and John Davenport. I didn't realize that it was going to spook this many people this much. And I thought, God, if I hadn't been so swamped with band stuff and everything else and knew a little more about what I was doing, such as gone to more of the all candidates meetings and even knocked on a few doors and stuff, all the nuts and bolts, I didn't do any of that. Only a couple of all candidates meetings, which were quite the cartoon show in itself. I mean, there were about 10 people running. And so if one of the coolest things about running for office, especially as somebody who wants to shake things up, is you'll meet some very interesting people. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was one TV show that had me on. Oh, here's the fringe candidates now. And of course, I'm on. And then another woman with this permanent scowl etched into her face was a follower of Lyndon LaRouche. Named Patricia Dole Beer, and I still have one of her brochures. Oh, God, is this good. Her main reason for running, Dianne Feinstein is a drug pusher.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I mean, maybe she's colluding with the LaRouche's favorite target for that was Queen Elizabeth and stuff. I mean, I love shit like that. There's another guy a serial candidate for office. I am, who would I imagine this role? Not Victor Buono, maybe Theo Beikel or even Burl Ives in this weird luminescent swimming pool blue double knit suit with a goatee. I am Tibor Usket. U for unique. KS for something or other. K for kind. You got it. Laid it all out. You have Polish Pope. Why not Polish Mayor?
Is this dude still running? What's he up to now?
No, he was quite a bit older than me, and I was. Oh, okay. Was I 21 by then? I must have been. Yeah. I just turned 21 by the time the election rolled around. So, too young to know better, which is the reason you do these things. And I just decided I didn't want to wind up being a Harold Stassen or something, keep running every single time and whatnot. Although that didn't do too badly for Bernie Sanders in the end. But, I had to pick and choose. And I've contemplated at times running against Pelosi because she quote unquote represents my district, but she sure as hell doesn't represent me, and I'm Green Party. So, but there's already a guy who's run repeatedly against her.
She hid.
Barry Hermanson, I believe. I didn't want to mess with him, but really regret not running for governor during the recall free-for-all with Schwarzenegger and all. And that was another Green Party decision because somebody who was running was Peter Camejo, who, there was a disillusioned ex-Democrat who'd been a congressman for a while from Humboldt named Dan Hamburg, was the Green Party meeting, and he was kind of prodding me to run for governor. I thought, hey, wait a minute, there's got to be somebody more qualified than me and actually walking the walk and doing this stuff right. And then in the corner was this kind of wise-looking owl with big glasses, and he knew so much stuff and just talked so much. So I was like, I'm endorsing him. And it turned out to be Peter Camejo, who I remembered from high school had appeared on the University of Colorado campus as the Socialist Party candidate for president. Same guy. And then, I got his literature in the mail later. I think he'd run already once for governor. And he was like something like a Marxist financial analyst. He made his money as a financial analyst so he could read a state budget and know where the bones were buried. So instead of the platitudes and the crap of the other people, there was his math. This is what I would cut, and this is what I would use the money to pay for, that we need way more than that stuff. Or maybe that was column one. But he would have made such a good governor until Schwarzenegger jumped in. He had a chance. And so I didn't want to mess with Peter Camejo. It would have been really wild because more people knew who I was from the Frankenchrist obscenity case where I was, national test case, Tipper Gore's pigeon or whatever. But, yeah.
Are you still active with the Green Party?
Well, not lately, because hardly any. The San Francisco Green Party never sends anything out or whatever. The Alameda County one does, but not the San Francisco one. So I see candidates' names and sometimes vote for them. Sometimes I don't know. I'm not so sure about this because there is an occasional Democrat in San Francisco worth voting for, like Tom Amiano when he was in the legislature, and before that the school board, and he was a comedian originally, LGBTQ comedian, and a good one with a funny high voice to boot. So God, what a great mayor he would have made. He almost knocked off Willie Brown practically as a write-in candidate, forced him into a runoff, but then Brown had all the precinct stuff sewn up, so that was that. But he was a good one. Trying to think of a couple more I have voted for, not a lot.
Have you ever thought about, because when I think about people that maybe could get the Greens to 5%, I mean, you're one of the people I think of. You're one of the few people I think of. I mean, I don't. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you might want to be like, oh, I don't know if I could, but like, I feel like you might be able to.
Because Ralph Nader was high profile. A lot of people knew who he was. A lot of people were utterly disillusioned with what kind of a corporate gangster President Clinton had turned out to be. And Gore was his vice president, who was all rah-rah, NAFTA, WTO. I was the one, the Democrat who voted for the Contras in the Senate. Yeah, hooray for you. Fuck you. And your wife is a danger to democracy and free speech in this country. And she's the whole back door to the most extreme parts of her buddies, the religious right and all. I mean, I think that's what cost Gore that election even more than Ralph Nader did was, and they had that whole thing blaming him all ready to go, as almost as though they knew they were going to lose and planned it. I have no idea, especially if you talk to our mutual friend, that great muckraker reporter, Greg Palast, author of The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, who made a later film about ballot bandits and electronic vote rigging that put Trump in 2016, the interstate cross-check program, and tipped the Senate to Republican majority just in time to put Gorsuch and the rapist and Amy I Can't Barrett on the Supreme Court. None of that would have happened if more people listened to what Greg had. And how could Hillary Clinton not have known about cross-check, let alone Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren? Where were they? That will always bother me. I mean, the only person who allowed that out, even on the supposed progressive network, which is owned by Comcast, MSNBC, the only one that would let Greg or cross-check on the air was Joy Reid, back when she just had a little morning show that people like me slept through because we're night owls and stuff. Tipper and her extremist Christian friends, like co-founder Susan Baker, wife of arch criminal and holy roller James Baker, who you remember from the dark Reagan Daddy Bush years and stuff. And his wife was Susan Baker, and she was on the board of directors of Focus on the Family, who is now, if I'm not mistaken, listed as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And that was her main ally. And so a lot of people, even if they didn't know as much of the dirty details as I did, because of the obscenity charge, and the time I had a flatmate, Suzanne Stefanik, who was a professional journalist, and she was muckraking into the PMRC. And she was finding out who these people really were, and that every last supposed expert on music that the Washington Wives called to that committee who was investigating evil music, chaired by Al Gore, by the way, why the Labor and Commerce Committee needed to look into evil music. Well, I think it's called pussy power. But although he wasn't exactly a liberal guy either, but he represented Nashville in the commercial country music establishment. That was his thing there. Even though they both claimed they were Grateful Dead fans later, but obviously didn't do the right drugs. But either that or Tipper was tripping on so much acid she began, running to Phyllis Schlafly and Susan Baker while on acid, thinking they were these wonderful people. I have no idea. Or she listened to a Judas Priest song or something and had visions of demons in her room. I have no idea.
Well, you were one of the people who was really
People
outspoken.
didn't vote for Gore because of her by a huge number.
Yeah, and you were really...
Thanks, Tipper.
Yeah, you were really outspoken about that issue. It was you, and then I think Frank Zappa was another one. Did you all ever cross paths while that whole thing was going on? Because
Yeah, I mean those Senate hearings, I didn't even watch them. And then it was interesting, though. Okay, who's defending freedom of speech here? Because this is so obviously back to the people who got rock and roll off the air in the 50s because there were black people singing, and it might lead to juvenile delinquency, or like they helped get cannabis, all kinds, banned in the mid 1930s. The other great horror to me of the FDR administration, besides putting Japanese American citizens in camps and a few little invasions south of the border too. But that's, that was a bad one. And that was on FDR's watch. And the way they got people behind it, the Reefer Madness movie, which was funded in part by the U.S. Treasury Department. But basically, you can't let your children start getting a hold of this devil weed. They might fall under the influence of jazz and start being infected by the jungle voodoo occult rhythms of the Negro and do voodoo occult things like say fuck you to their stupid parents or whatever. I don't know. And it worked. It always works. I mean, a lot of these attacks on don't buy rock and roll records in the 50s, the Greater Citizens Council of New Orleans demands it. That was the Klan.
When you think about Nazi punks fuck off, how, do you see like a rise in Nazism right now? Because like I've seen you sing that song recently, like on video, and I gotta just ask, like how do you feel, like thinking about when you wrote it and thinking about where we're at as a society now?
Well, I think the scary part is, I always watch corporate McNews for what Wall Street and the military-industrial complex really have in mind for us. And they really, really, really want lockstep fascism now. Capitalism isn't good enough. They won't stop till it's total in-your-face feudalism, which it practically is at this point. And the more people get upset about how badly being hurt, the more you have to have a violent fascist police state that people actually like, because you've got them afraid of something else and stuff. And instead of Joseph Goebbels, we have, all the corporate McNews networks pretty much, and on down, all that and stuff. Who owns what now? It's not just Rupert Murdoch. It's the other wannabe Rupert Murdochs who let him be out front and take all the bullets and spears to satiate his egomania and all that. What do you do when Jerry Hall leaves you and stuff? She married you when you were pushing 90, and then she divorced you anyway. Didn't even wait for your money. But anyway, so, but you see these signs, like Trump announces for president, and it is all over all the news. When other people like that, even Steve Forbes announced, has a hell of a lot more money than Donald Trump, there wasn't this big thing about it. Obviously he was a tabloid, comedy star and very bankable one for decades and all. But, and he loved it. It got him attention, and he wanted attention, didn't care how he got it. So, but then the fact that he said such horrible things about immigrants and Mexicans in particular, they're rapists and everything else, they played that up. Even if they finally said, he shouldn't have said that, they played it up. Pop stardom in a political candidate kind of way overnight. And I thought, oh, well, then I did one of my little YouTube rants, which is my way of staying in the spoken word game when I decided to get back to rockin' too. No, very few, if any, spoken word shows, but I really feel something needs to be said. It comes on as What Would Jello Do? Mm-hmm. So I found a What Would Jesus Do shirt in a thrift store years before, and I just got a piece of masking tape and put Jello across the Jesus. And, my rant casts were off and running. And they started small, like when Jerry Brown ran for governor again, and Gavin Newsom stormed off to Hawaii and disappeared on his own city for 10 days in a tantrum because he went down to Hollywood and nobody would give him money to be governor. He was still really young, calling himself the California Obama, but they think, no, we don't care if you're going to promote yourself that way. We're all back in Jerry Brown because he knows how to be a governor. He didn't take that very well. Suddenly, they're not calling them white supremacists. They're calling them white nationalists. Easier to digest. Yeah, I am proud of America. I'm a nationalist. That's not so bad. White supremacists. Christian supremacists. You have Islamists. We are much worse threat to us is Christianists. And some of them are obviously fucking terrorists and stuff. Way more incidents of terrorism, including fatal ones in this country after 9/11 from domestic right-wing extremists, as in white people for the most part. They are by far the biggest group. By far the biggest group. And so that's where it's coming from. Oh, they don't call them neo-Nazis now. They call them the alt-right. To make it sound kind of cool. Alt-right. Alt-country, this is kind of cool hipster country music. Alt-rock, alt-country, alt-right. Yeah, this is kind of hip, kind of cool. Yeah, this guy, Scoot Spencer, guys, he's kind of interesting. They're promoting it. Which means we have a hell of a lot of people now, and even more than since January 6th, when Dirty Donnie was still in the White House causing so much damage. It's gotten worse. And it's much, much more acceptable, not just on social media, but media in general and social interactions in general, to come right out and say, yeah, I'm a bigot.
Yeah, no, it's.
I mean, that new senator from Ohio is a total neo-Nazi. Total neo-Nazi.
Yeah, no, it really is something to behold. And so we'll fast forwarding to 2024.
Ron DeSantis, what am I saying? I mean, that guy is, he's David Duke with Rupert Murdoch's backing to be the next president.
Yeah. See, I think that Ron, and I was actually going to ask you this, so we'll just jump into this now. And I'll give you my answer. I think Ron DeSantis is by far the most dangerous person in American politics. I think he makes Trump look like. Right. I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I realize after people were just so relieved to get Clown Prince W out of the White House, he was the worst president in history. Yes. Academic historians agree almost unanimously. I had no idea they hated James Buchanan so much. But no, this guy was worse. And I warned people, the repugs are getting so far to the right and so insanely, brazenly corrupt. And they're still so bitter about the New Deal, and even in the case of Peter Thiel, women being allowed to vote and all. The next one they actually get in will be worse than W. Bush, I guarantee you.
Well, that's what
my prediction was a little off, because I thought, what we really have to fear is a smarter Bush getting in, and that's what's going to be next. No, we got a complete buffoon, but they didn't have to sell any of their other buffoons to get people to vote for him, because this guy already had a cult following. They realized quickly after that first poll, after he announced and descended down the gilded stairs after spewing this racist sub-David Duke crap and all, and people lapping it up, was, they thought, again, oh my God, this guy could win. But then in, dirty little big business land, it was all, wow, this guy, we don't have to get people to like him like we would with Rubio or Jeb Bush or one of those. No, he already has all these fans. And he doesn't just have fans, he already has a cult following. And look at the stuff coming out of his mouth, and they're eating it up. We could get away with more damage with this guy in than all those others combined. Not even Ted Cruz could cause this much trouble if we get him in. Forget that Trump is completely unqualified and quite possibly clinically insane as well. No, it's the people right below him, cabinet secretaries and the second and third in charge, who were the ones with all the skills, wielding the machetes and the meat cleavers, knowing exactly what to kill and what to amputate. And, the kind of judges that they can ram through when Uncle Mitch is running the Senate, because that part of the election got stolen too. Put in all these people who could care less about the Constitution and more about the ongoing corporate coup. And, maybe this original intent thing, they can finally come right out and say, well, yeah, I mean, the original Constitution was, said that only white male landowners can vote, and slavery was perfectly cool.
Is there anything you're looking forward to in 2024? Like, is there anything you're hopeful for? Will you run for president on the green ticket?
I haven't penciled that in my calendar. I hadn't done that in 2020 either. I mean, I was getting sued up the ass by the now estranged former members of Dead Kennedys because I didn't want to put Holiday in Cambodia in a Levi's commercial. And yes, Alternative Tentacles owed them money. We made a mistake. We found the mistake, not them. Paid everybody in full, including me. I'm a Dead Kennedy, remember? I wouldn't rip off my brothers or who I thought they were, but they sued after all anyway, to get revenge on the commercial, and because East Bay Ray seemed to think he was going to be able to sell the thing to Warner Brothers and laugh all the way to the bank, which of course didn't happen, and also made it such an ugly situation I've refused to ever perform with them again. Highest offer I've turned down was $4 million. You know how long it took me to say no? That was it. I don't want to. You do something like that, you got to be all in, and you really got to tear people's heads off, like the Stooges did, like the Sonics did, like the Radio Birdman did when they resurfaced. You got to be that good, or you shouldn't be doing that. And I'm not sure those guys even rehearse. So, and the complaints I get are just nonstop on that. So anyway, that's a digression, but that was just chewing up and had my time, verge of a nervous breakdown. How could this be happening? Blah, 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 blah. Trial in May, and after they reneged on a settlement because Ray thought they'd make more money and stuff like that. So, I hadn't planned on running for president. Oh, well. What happened was that couple guys from the New York State Green Party found my number and called me out of the blue. We had just had our convention, and we put your name in the ring, and you came in second to Ralph Nader. You want to run? I hadn't penciled that in on my calendar. Oh, I don't know. And only the second conversation, well, you are green, aren't you? Well, luckily for you, I am. It's a good thing you asked, isn't it? What if I was a libertarian? But no, I'm not in. I like taxes and I hate guns, so no. But I'm more socialist in my beliefs. Tim Yohannan, the Maximum Rock and Roll, said why he was a socialist, that there has to be a government to take take stuff away from the people who have too much and get it to the people who have too little.
When I was growing up, I listened to a lot of punk rock music, and you're one of the reasons I started doing stand-up, which I've been a touring comedian for almost 15 years now.
Awesome.
And
you better let us know if you're coming to towns, because I can only pay attention to so many things. And not only is the scene, what's left of in San Francisco, very splintered in different musical genres, but then the music scene doesn't know what the poetry scene is doing, doesn't know what the visual art scene is doing, doesn't know what the comedy scene is doing, which I'm embarrassed to admit I'm as guilty as anybody else about that. I mean, I love Will Durst. I mean, friends with Will Durst. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, I opened for Will years ago. I was just starting out. I got to open for Will, and I still every now and again cross paths with him. But
yeah. I mean, we all got to wish him the best, because in 2019 he suffered a horrible stroke.
Yeah,
backstage after a show, and apparently his mind is still pretty good, but his body, he's still in rehab and physical therapy. He has not been able to go home.
Okay. Yeah, I know he was
going able to unbend and denarl his body enough that he can stand up.
Oh, is it that bad? Wow.
I mean, what a courageous guy to keep pushing and not giving up at all.
I didn't know it was that
On
bad.
Renegade Roundtable, hopefully, but
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to ask you though, because I would see your spoken word stuff, and that was kind of one of the things where I'm like, well, I'll try stand up. So I know like the gist of the story. It was for like a UCLA opportunity, and one of your friends talked you into it. But I wanted to just ask you if you would do me the honor of telling me that story straight from you, like how you got pushed into spoken word.
spoken word.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just any friend; it was Harvey Kubernik in Los Angeles, mover and shaker dating back, I think, into the late 60s and stuff. Mainly, but not always music, obviously writers and jazz people and whatnot. And he had a little label called Freeway Records, and it was his mission to prod musicians, especially punk underground musicians, or something like Jeffrey Lee Pierce of Gun Club, or some of the others, into doing their words as poetry. And it was easier to get Henry Rollins, the Black Flag, out there because Harvey knew he kept a journal. And so Henry was a voracious writer and had many, many things to read. And while Jeffrey Lee just read fan mail and stuff, and that was his spoken word. But the beauty of a term like spoken word is it doesn't have to be a poetry reading. It's an umbrella term. It can be poetry, it can be comedy, it can be commentary, it can be performance art, or in some people's cases, all of the above. And so that's the beauty of it. And so I started with expanded versions of Dead Kennedy lyrics, or maybe some other ones I'd never turned into lyrics, and let them kind of flow. And I've never really considered myself a poet per se. I'm a lyricist, but, I never had any aspersions of getting literary critics to pat me on the head for how wonderful I am, although I am proud of my lyrical legacy over the years and put a lot of work into them too. But so that's my literature, I guess. He kept calling, and and then finally, finally, they had a spoken word thing, a little coffee house, Kirchhoff Hall at UCLA. And this is showing the 65 part. Damn. Oh, finally it comes to me. Yes, I was paired with a poet. That was part of his mission, was to get the music people who had lyrics with the poets together with each other and stuff. And it was Michelle T. Clinton, was an author who read some of her stuff before I came on. And I had not been that nervous since the first Dead Kennedy show, not knowing what was going to happen. Hadn't done it before. When I was shaking in my shoes for the very first play I was ever in, a walk-on playing a blimp salesman in Sunrise at Campobello, the one about Franklin Roosevelt after he had polio, putting himself back together and stuff and all that. It's actually pretty good. See the movie if you don't see the I'm not sure it was ever a book, but it was written by Dory Sherry, who was mainly a film producer, I think. But anyway, so and I forgot my line. I brain farted my line. I was practically a one-line part. Oh, I felt bad, but the guy who liked me reading Dead Babies and as a poem in speech class the year before, that didn't stop him from casting me as Jonathan Brewster, the Boris Karloff role in Arsenic and Old Lace and stuff. So anywho, you all got to start somewhere, right? I mean, the first Dead Kennedys demo is kind of generic too compared to what came later. You just got to encourage people. If they open for you or they give you a sample of their work, even if it's not that great, at least encourage them. You did it. It's not like a school assignment. It's not a coach telling you what to do. You did it. Yeah, the beauty of punk, especially in DIY. There's a lot of other musicians have gotten involved in the spirit of DIY since, but punk is what brought it back and broke the shackles of major labels and stuff where everybody had to have paid their dues and could all play guitar as good as Jimmy. Yeah, no, man. I thought I was born at the wrong time. Then punk happened. I was born at the perfect time. So there was spoken word and Dead Kennedys for a while, and then the band split, but we were still working, or mainly I was still working to finish the Bedtime for Democracy album and all, and then the police raided my house. looking for harmful matter. And I knew we were targeted by the PMRC because Susan Baker had singled out the H.R. Giger's artwork and Dead Kennedy's Frankenchrist album as something she didn't like. And then another one singled out Dead Kennedy's In God We Trust Incorporated 12-inch EP, which had that great Winston Smith sculpture on the front of a bowling trophy Jesus, gold Jesus, on a cross of dollar bills. You know, that was our reaction to Reagan getting in and Jerry Falwell mouthing off like he owned the fucking country and could tell us what to do and who to pray to and what we were allowed to read and all that. I don't take that very well. So that one, I actually, the piece of art came first, then I had to come up with a record to put around it to justify getting that piece of art on a record cover as fast as possible. And they noticed that one too. You know, it was a cult. It was blasphemy. It was anti-Christian. Let's not forget that their original demands, and this was Tipper talking too, they didn't want explicit lyric parental advisory. They had a long list of specific things they wanted red flagged, and for major labels to, quote, reassess the contracts of artists who traffic in things like drug content, devil worship, which some of their cohorts included Judaism in that category, of course. Wow. And, we found the anti-Semites connected with them too. And some of which Tipper Gore name dropped in her book as being good people. And talk about a Trojan horse for fundamentalists. Wonder what she's doing now. But anyway, on the laundry list, they wanted special red flags for devil worship, drug content, juvenile delinquency stuff, guns, and red flag for, quote, homosexual content. As well as anything mentioning suicide, even if it was telling people not to commit suicide, which is what Ozzy Osbourne's Suicide Solution song was really about.
Right.
Yeah. You know, just like Steppenwolf got pushed as this big rah-rah drug ban where even my dad, who should know better, was saying, not sure the Steppenwolf should be on the radio. But the song they were singling out, which never was a radio hit, was The Pusher, which is actually written by the folky country guy Hoyt Axton. It wasn't a Steppenwolf song. They were covering it, and it's one of the most powerful anti-drug songs you will ever hear. Because I became Tipper's pigeon, there were 4 other people charged originally, but it became down to me and Michael Bonanno, who was now, by then, had left Alternative Tentacles and wasn't the GM anymore, but he was at the time when the 14-year-old girl bought Frankenchrist and gave it to her little brother for Christmas, and then preacher dad finds what's inside, and instead of going to the store and returning, he calls the cops. And then I thought, oh, no big deal, whatever. And then my legal guy, hey, you're charged in L.A. What? Okay, well, now what do we do? We've got to go down there and pay a fine or something? No, you don't understand. CBS is calling me. CNN is calling me. Blah, 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 blah. And I thought, oh, shit. We're Tipper's pigeon. We're Ed Meese's target for porn. Okay, time to fight. Having file after file on PMRC bigots and religious right people, which the police strewed all over the room when they raided my house. They even looked in the cat box for harmful matter. Although the fun part was there was another roommate who'd moved out by then who drank a lot of milk, and that was when the missing kids were on the back of all the milk cartons, so he collected them. So the whole, what are all those pictures of missing children doing on your kitchen wall? Do you know where they are?
Jeez.
And I had to not laugh, right? Gonna get beaten or shot. All I had on was a bathrobe. So,
Did they at least clean the litter box for you?
Of course not. They didn't clean Suzanne's files either. I don't think she wasn't home at the time, just found it later. The fact that they went for that and none of her other research files, that was very significant, I thought. Still bummed they never hired me for the Batman movies, but Jim Carrey was a better Riddler than I would have been anyway. So you have to accept these things.
Well, it's not
But
too late. I mean, they make a new Batman movie every 5 hours, man. It's not too late. Like,
yeah, I know. I live in the wrong town. I was born to do cartoon voices. I am a cartoon. Plus, I'm good with impressions from way back in school. But who knows? Maybe someday.
hey,
But,
man. I mean, I know you've been in San Francisco a long time, but LA would be happy to have you, I'm sure.
oh, I know. But then if I'm there too long, I realize why I would be happy not to live in LA. Ew. The smog, the gridlock, the people, except for the cool people.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, and I guess as we're wrapping up here, is there anything you'd like to plug, or anything you got coming up, or any Alternative Tentacles bands you recommend
Well,
checking out in
Alternative
particular?
Tentacles, they're always doing stuff there. New
Yeah.
album by the Darts, all kick-ass, all-woman garage band. That just came out. You know who they are, too. You mentioned
Yes.
you liked them before you started the interview. The one thing you knew besides Dead Kennedys was the Darts. And this album is better than anything they've done before. Believe you me. I made sure it wasn't so damn lo-fi this time, for one thing, so you get the fuller breadth of their power. And don't make it sound like a little 60s record when you're a 21st century band who really fucking rocks on stage. Capture the Darts. There's a way to do it and still make it crystalline, pristine. Great engineer they've worked with, even clear back to Nicole and Christina's earlier band, the Love Me Nots, which is where I first saw them. And, good sounding records, good songwriting, heavier in Darts than Love Me Nots for the most part, but still really melodic and, Blondie with teeth at times. And then you got the rest of their sound. But, anywho, and then we just put out 2 7-inches by bands we're hoping to do a lot more with. One of them is a 7-inch by a band with several albums out who wants us to pick them up and start working with them. Old friends called Culture Shock. No, not the Culture Shock with a C with Dick Lucas from Subhumans and Fish fronting. No. We already put them out. This is Kulchur and this SHO. I guess it's CK, the English spelling. And it's mostly people from other countries. And the main man is a wild man, as unique and powerful on stage in his own way as Eugene Hutz from Gogol Bordello. I mean, they know each other. They both call themselves gypsy punks, but it's still very different thing. And Gino Yevgevich, he is, Eugene's from Ukraine, and a lot of wild Ukraine stories. When I interviewed him recently for Renegade Roundtable, I just did Gino too as a bookend, because at least Eugene left Ukraine long before all this stuff went down. Gino got trapped in Sarajevo when Milosevic and I guess even Franjo Tudjman as well from Croatia began shelling Sarajevo. He and his family, they were trapped there for 2 years or something like that. To get water to be able to survive, they had to take a jug or two, and brave being shot by snipers a couple blocks to where there was a water spigot that worked. Fill up your jugs and go back there, not knowing if you were going to die or get shot every single day for 2 years, stuff like that. Yeah, that's one of them. And then the other one we picked up is a very, very, it's a hip hop group, so unusual and just unclassifiably weird. They're on Alternative Tentacles. And the name is Wheelchair Sports Camp. And I was first introduced to their leader, Kalen Heffernan, when I was spinning records trying to see if I could find something to buy at this great store in Denver called Wax Tracks, where they sometimes let me stay extra and we hang out, listen to music. And then another old friend from the original Colorado punk scene, Mark Bleasner, he came in with a friend of his, and it was Kalen, and she was born severely disabled, uses a motorized wheelchair. She's a little person. She's not paralyzed. It's brittle bones. She's gone through hundreds and hundreds of broken bones. You fall out of your wheelchair, land on your elbow, there goes your elbow, stuff like that. And she also is a kick-ass ball of activist energy you do not want to mess with. I mean, she comes up, and here's a CD I made. And by the way, I just got done blockading Senator Cory Gardner's office because he's trying to kill Obamacare. she actually came because a bigger nationwide group that got the Disability Rights Act passed in the first place, ADAPT, A-D-A-P-T. I can't remember what it stands for, but she joined them for that. But she was so articulate and funny as hell that she wound up being the spokesman in all the media coverage for this. And Democracy Now! There's 12 or 15 of them. She's on Renegade Roundtable too. I'm not sure that one's up yet, but you can hear all about people in wheelchairs going into his office for a very literal sit-in and refusing to leave for 3 days until, as Wesley Willis would say, they were arrested and taken to jail. And of course, some of them wore diapers, some of them used catheters and leg bags and stuff, and all that had to be dealt with, as well as getting people who could use a regular toilet to a toilet. And Gardner's people weren't cooperating at all until the pissed-in waste baskets and a few other things. The pile of diapers got so high they had to cave in and be a little more cooperative.
Wow. That is.
And that was not her first taste of being arrested and taken down to the jail either. So, so after that, guess who ran for mayor of Denver?
She did?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's you can Google wheelchair sports camp or her own name, which just Google wheelchair sports camp. You'll find her.
Well, Jello, thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for everything you do. And I'm glad I caught your spoken word at the right time when I was in my early 20s. So thank you very much for that.
Well, even now, if you listen to the ones from clear back then, even if it's not as totally up to date with certain news things, like Reagan was still president during the first one, actually the first two. So, but even then, they're really good for being stuck in traffic jams, long plane flights, or if you really want a history lesson of you are there kind of stories from that period all the way up to the Iraq War, when, I had a really good one about all the dirty stuff going on there. Talk about another whole regime that should all be behind bars, the Bush-Cheney regime. My God.
Yes.
But this is what happens when you don't put them in prison. They have a way of coming back.
That was Jello Biafra. Check out AlternativeTentacles.com to check out some of the music that Jello referenced. I think that's the best thing to do. I don't think Jello Biafra necessarily needs a Ron Placone plug. I think he's doing okay. Andrew Saxena does the music for the 1000 podcast, and you can check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcast. I said podcast a lot in that sentence. Please leave this show a 5-star review if you would be so kind. Wherever you get it from, if you could leave us a 5-star review, that would be amazing. And if you want to support this show on the sustainability end, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Ron Placone. For a give what you can level, you get all kinds of perks. I'll make you a theme song. You get live streams not available anywhere else. You get the full 1,000 episodes. Again, this conversation with Jello was 2.5 hours. If you want to hear the full episode, become a patron at a give what you can level. And Andrew Saxena, who I mentioned does the music, he and myself are going to be doing a behind-the-scenes bonus 1,000 podcast on a regular basis that can all be found at patreon.com/Ron Placone for as low as $1 a month. Thank you so very, very much, and see you next week. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1,000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1,000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1,000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.